Hi, thanks. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. This is our 51st episode of the Unboxing AI webinar series. And I'm Kritika. I manage AI partnerships at CARPL. For those who don't know, we meet weekly on every Thursday at 11 a.m. ET. And, we have our friends, collaborators, and partners, and we talk about the great things that are happening in the radiology AI industry. For those who don't know what CARPL is, we are the enterprise medical imaging platform that helps you test, deploy, and monitor the different AI solutions in radiology space that exist all around the world. Today, for this webinar, we have Dr. Christopher McKee with us. Thank you, Chris, for joining in.
Thank you, Kritika. It's a pleasure to be here.
Same here, Chris. So I would like to, tell everyone about Chris. Chris is a leader in health and life sciences innovation. He is specialized in business development for transformative healthcare solutions. His expertise particularly lies in digital health, artificial intelligence, and precision medicine, and he leads cross-functional teams to implement such breakthrough technologies. Chris also has collaborated with a lot of startups, academic institutions, and healthcare providers to identify such unmet needs in the healthcare space. As managing director at Better Medicine, he plays a key role in expanding international partnerships and driving innovation in healthcare delivery. Now, beyond all of this, Chris is also an investment champion for the Northern Powerhouse, supporting economic growth and investment all across the UK. Chris, do you want to add anything more to this?
No, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. That's grand. Thank you for also mentioning the Northern Powerhouse role as well. It's great to be able to support the northern ecosystem of the UK, as sort of a bit of a side project to the work I do with Better Medicine.
That's very interesting. So, Chris, let's talk about your journey at Better Medicine. The products you are developing at Better Medicine, and what's the vision?
Certainly. So, so my role in Better Medicine as the managing director is to really help and support the team as a whole in terms of its commercial and collaboration opportunities globally, really. So every market that we're interested in engaging with, I aim to support it to establish new and exciting relationships. This could be with fellow industry partners, with clinical sites, medical professionals, academic institutions, and to nurture those relationships and help to develop them into sort of tangible products together through a very sort of joint collaborative approach. So it requires a bit of nuance for every relationship, and everything's a little bit different. Different markets are a bit different as well. But the idea is to establish long-lasting partnerships for the company, as well as supporting as many other tasks as you have to spin as being in a startup environment as well. Um, but to highlight about Better Medicine specifically, so Better Medicine is in the realms of AI diagnostic medical imaging, and I know there's a lot of key partners working with Carpool who are in that space. I guess the subtle difference between ourselves and probably the collaborative opportunity between ourselves and other players in the oncology space, which is where we focus, is that rather than focusing on one organ at a time, we take what we call a sort of a multi-organ, full body holistic approach to diagnostic imaging. So we have a dual arm approach to this. So yes, we build fully automated diagnostic models to detect cancer in certain organ types, and we aim to focus on some of the more neglected regions in the body, such as in the abdominal space. We've actually just CE-marked the world's first kidney cancer diagnostic tool to help aid in incidental findings of kidney cancer and kidney lesions, which has been a significant problem in healthcare globally, as well as monitoring the disease. So, but we combine that approach with also what we call a sort of non-diagnostic, semi-automated lesion management system tooling to help essentially to get radiologists through the workload through on any CT scan, multi-organ, where if you detect any any lesions, we will help you to automatically measure it, segment it, longitudinally track it, have registration algorithms to help identify the lesions again in follow-up scans, help automate your reporting, and even RECIST applications as well. So the idea is that we want to take the burden away from doing the routine day-to-day tasks as much as possible, and also aid in those incidental finding pathways. So by combining these two methods in parallel, you've kind of got a sort of a full body work solution, and that can be utilized at least at this stage on CT scans for radiologists in the oncology space. And we're pretty excited to be bringing these things to the world, really, because there's particularly in the lesion segmentation space. I know a lot of interest developing there, and this is a relatively new technology for AI to be playing a significant role in. And we've had a lot of great conversations with clinicians, not just radiologists, but oncologists and other specialists who really see the value on something like that, which isn't necessarily going to uh, have too much impact on their decision making or create any unnecessary false positives. So it's definitely an exciting place to be working in and feels very state of the art.
No, that's definitely very exciting, Chris, and you're working on some very unique products there in the market. So, if you were to explain what you do to a 5-year-old, how would
Yes.
you do that?
Yeah, well, basically, 5-year-olds love to draw. But what I say is if we got two 5-year-olds in a room and they were drawing on the same piece of paper, and you told them to draw around the same thing, they would still draw slightly differently, right? And I think this is what happens with um, radiologists to an extent. They're very good at what they do, and but when it comes to it, there's some subtle differences in terms of how things are measured. And we're wanting to sort of optimize that and almost make that a little bit more consistent in terms of the potential variability. So, and I wouldn't say those words to a 5-year-old to be fair, but I'm struggling to think how I would say that. But the idea ultimately is that measuring things and lots of things can be very, very dull and boring. And we want to actually bring the excitement back into it so that you can do the thing that's exciting, that is making the decision, the diagnosis, and actually getting the patient healthier again as a result of quicker diagnosis. So that's how I would at least aim to describe it to a 5-year-old.
No, no, that's great. I see a lot of people joining in, Chris, and I would request the audience, before we continue, if there are any questions, please feel free to drop in your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll take them up as we go ahead. So Chris, while I was introducing we know you've worked extensively with NHS. So would you like to shed some light on what your experience has been like, and what the market has to offer?
Certainly. So, I mean, this is very obviously quite UK specific in some ways, but I find that the NHS as a model can be replicated in other healthcare systems. So I'm sure this will still be familiar to other international markets. So I did used to work in the National Health Service in the UK. I was not a clinician. My doctorate's in cellular molecular medicine, but I have an understanding at least of the molecular elements of medicine. But in this case, I actually went in as a business development and innovation manager. So my role when I was in the NHS was to bring technologies like what Better Medicine are developing into our ecosystem to establish key collaborations and opportunities and bring new and exciting technology into our healthcare ecosystem. More specifically in the northern parts of the UK, and I was working for the Leeds Teaching Hospital NHS Trust, which is a huge trust in the north of the UK, one of the biggest in Europe. So I traveled all over the world, found technology, and brought it here. And I think the reason why this is also how I met Better Medicine as well. The reason why this market is so attractive to people is the high quality of evidence that you can generate here, and the significant amount of data and clinical registries that are in place here. It's very well established. The population diversity is high, and so the data you get here is of extremely high quality, and the standards you have to achieve are of high quality. So the attractive element of this market for me has always been, look, we do have a level of excellence here, that companies do want to strive for. And if you can make it work here, or you can generate and validate your technology within this market, you can take it anywhere.
Yeah.
You can go, for example, back to India, which is the original home of CARPL. You can go to the United States and say, look what we've done here, and let's try and replicate it on the US and with US data. There's all of the world sort of opens up to you at that point, particularly as there's such a strong academic arm to this country. There are a huge number of key opinion leaders, particularly in the field of radiology and oncology within the UK. And although I worked with pretty much every technology in every specialty back in the day, radiology was always a significant one for me. And it basically it's always been a very, very good sort of validation market and testing market and an evidence generation market, health economics evidence generation market is very good for that. Um, I mean, I have to be realistic that sometimes the implementation side is tough here. I'd be lying if I said, procurement and adoption of technology in the UK is an easy process. It's not. That's where I think the UK and the National Health Service certainly trips up. It did when I was there as well, even though I tried to implement some things to accelerate that. Um, but the market is definitely, when it's good, it's extremely good and very valuable. And it was actually a pleasure working in that ecosystem for a number of years to enable particularly international innovation to enter this region, which of course helps the economic side of things in the UK, but in particular it helped, and the aim was to help the patients and bring that technology, that state-of-the-art technology, to straight to the bedside where the patient was.
And that's very interesting insight on the UK market, Chris. And you've also worked extensively with the Indian startups. So any insights on how these markets are different? How was your journey working in UK market versus the Indian market?
Yeah, so I've had a fair bit of exposure with Indian startups. I have the pleasure of being a mentor for a group called Connexus Global, who are a fantastic group who focus on particularly on female founders in not just health, but health is a significant part of it. So female founders from India. To be fair, I think there's a lot of synergy there. I think the recent UK-India trade deal is going to have significant positive impacts, actually, which is great. I'm certainly really been quite excited about that. I think the big difference that I found in terms of working practice is Indian health tech startups are fantastic and they get up and going, and their technology, their ideas, their ambition, their drive is solid. And I'd say that drive is equaled here. I think the big difference is the Indian startups love to go what I call like to do A and Z, but not necessarily A to Z. And that's the big difference is saying like, okay, well, we have to slow the pace down a little bit because people over here just won't be able to keep pace with you. So let's try and do a little bit more like A to Z rather than A and Z, because with some things we need to fill out in the middle. But otherwise, I think India and the UK have had a long history, for good or for better or worse, but our healthcare systems are really quite aligned in many ways. And it's always really quite wonderful to be able to have these conversations with up and coming startups in a range of different healthcare sectors from India who are interested in this market and how it can work for them. So it's and I'm glad to be able to continue doing that. I mean, this is all extracurricular to Better Medicine, of course. I do this outside of the Better Medicine hours, but it's something that I'm really excited to continue doing and hoping to do a lot more of later in the year, as some of these relationships start to flourish.
Yeah, yeah. So Chris, just going back to the products that you're building, right? And you mentioned that your products are being used by radiologists, clinicians, oncologists. So how do they perceive your product differently? Like, what is it that a radiologist is focused on versus, what is a clinician looking at?
Yes. Certainly. I think it depends because so I mentioned the word racist earlier, and I imagine some of the radiologists on the call have like at least subconsciously they're sort of twitching and because that word is not popular in radiology because it's a very dull, long-winded process to look at disease progression of tumor lesions. It's some would say it's quite an outdated method. It's often used in the clinical trial setting to look at disease progression. But more and more, I believe oncologists are actually saying it would be very useful for them to understand the impact of chemotherapy and other methods to look at whether disease is progressing or regressing. And so but radiologists don't have enough time as it is. So when we say that we can automate this process by essentially the click of a button, it's it is taken as sort of a positive thing. And once you get past the initial hurdle of, oh, RECIST is really boring and I hate talking about it. Um, so I think there's definitely a difference there. We're in the oncology space, so we focus particularly on that side of things. So I can't speak for people who are working in sort of cardiovascular or other sectors. But it's definitely one difference I've noticed there between different clinicians. Urologists, because we work with kidney cancer, urologists' perspective is also very interesting because they almost want to jump a few steps like ahead of the radiologist, and we have to actually educate them to say, no, the radiology part is significant. You can't just utilize our AI without the radiologist. Like the radiologist has to be there. So it's always interesting hearing these different perspectives. And but of course, for us, the radiologist is key. They're going to be the ones using our tool, validating it, approving it, and making sure that it works. So ultimately, this is it's a key conversation for us to have, and also bring all these people into the room together so they can see, well, how is the technology really working? How is it being validated? What is it actually CE marked for as well? What are the safety parameters? And it's something we'll actually are looking at doing more multidisciplinary team type meetings so we can have those conversations. In terms of the radiologist responses, we found a mixture. So it really depends on the personal interests of the radiologist. Talking to a chest radiologist about kidney cancer sometimes results in well, I'm not so bothered about talking about kidney cancer, but others see it a different way. So it really depends on who you talk to on what day and what their personal interest is. However, our other tool, the iMeasure tool I mentioned, which is the multi-organ lesion management system, so far has attracted mostly positive discussions with most radiologists, especially those that kind of see the difference between the AI-based method of segmentation versus the traditional, almost like a watershedding approach that has been utilized by PAC systems in the past. The people who've noticed that difference, that voxel level difference, have had nothing but positive things to say, and if anything, recommendations of additional functionalities they would like to see.
No, that's great, Chris. So a couple of questions have come in. So the first question is, do you feel the largest market will be in clinical radiology or with clinical trials sponsored by pharma to standardize response measurements? What do you think
Ah,
about that?
that's a very good question, and one that I brought to the table myself several times. It depends what you mean by biggest market. If you mean biggest market in terms of biggest revenue opportunities and biggest revenue share, I honestly would think that clinical trials and pharma is going to be the bigger market. It just is, and it's definitely a place that we are focused on quite significantly. And I do have a bit of a pharma background as well. I did work in pharma a little bit and in big CROs with pharma. So yes, it is. On the one hand, yes, that is the biggest market. That being said, the clinical market in and of itself, if we're not talking specifically about immediate revenue, is probably bigger as a whole when we take a global perspective. So, but the problem with that market is it's harder for reimbursements, it's harder for procurement and adoption. So it's a longer journey to revenue generation. So it's an interesting question, definitely.
Thank you for answering that, Chris. Two more questions have come in. So one is, how do you work with users who only want to focus on certain body parts?
Well, the advantage of being of going multi-organ from the outset is that you can offer people bits and pieces, if you pardon the pun, in terms of people's interests. So if people say, okay, well, yeah, you have something that works on everything, but I just want to focus on the liver, it's like, well, that's fine. Just use it on you can just use it on the liver. There's nothing. In fact, we would recommend it in some ways. If people want to work with us to expand our uh, fully automated diagnostic models to other organs in the abdomen, um, similar to our kidney model, which we're delighted to be bringing to the CARPL platform soon, then we would work together on that. We're already building multiple different organ models and validating those in parallel. And as I say, we're focusing on organ types that haven't yet been covered routinely in the market so far. Most people are focusing on breast, lung, and prostate.
Yeah.
There are others focusing on some other things in terms of oncology, but that we want to cover the things that are being, well, I would say neglected or at least slightly less interested so far in the market space.
So Chris, now, since your model focuses on multiple body parts, so how do you measure success beyond accuracy, right? Do you look at patient outcomes, clinical outcomes, productivity from a radiologist point of view, cost saving? What would be your biggest success metric?
Mm. So all of the above in terms of what we're aiming for. I mean, again, that's a very good question. I think there's been a lot of focus historically at least over the past few years on specificity, accuracy, and a range of other sort of metrics that are publishable and reportable. And that's been very important to convince the market that those numbers are high enough for the technology to even be used in the first place. And we're obviously going down that route too. But of course, that's not enough. And the market is moving more towards, okay, we accept that there's high levels of specificity and accuracy in all of these products. They're all reporting this. But how can you prove it in a real world setting that it has
Yeah.
impact? And so we've already, I believe, completed an initial health economics study over in Estonia, because I failed to mention that the company was originally founded and is based out of Estonia, which is a wonderful ecosystem for innovation. I'm in the UK for the UK branch, but it's an Estonian company. So we've done a health economic study there. We will be looking to replicate those studies in the UK and other markets as well to really look at real world impact. What is that cost benefit analysis? What are potential patient outcome measures for this? And how can we tangibly measure it? So for us, that is a goal, 100% a goal. It's something we're working towards. We're a relatively young startup. Our first CE mark product came out a few months ago, so we're early in that journey. We're going to be working with companies like CARPL to prove the value of these technologies in a real world setting. And it's something I do recommend other AI companies really think about, because at the end of the day, what matters to the clinicians is, yes, of course, the tools and the technologies have to work, but that's a given. It's does this actually help me? Does this actually make my life easier? And more importantly, does this actually have a positive impact on my patients? So that's 100% the goal of better medicine, definitely.
Chris, we look forward to the study that you are planning for the UK market. And on similar notes, we have a question wondering how we can work together. So this is actually from Sarthi, one of my colleagues. So he's asking, wondering how we can together work with Better Medicine to identify potential clients who may want full body solutions. And are there
Mm.
any specific type of specialists or practices who we should be looking out for?
Yeah, so I mean, the interesting thing when you take a full body approach is how people react to that. So when you say full body, then people think, oh, well, only sites that are doing sort of full body CT scans are applicable. That's not true. And I think for now, we have to be honest and realistic about what the model has been trained on so far and what it could potentially do in the future. So far we have trained this model on a number of organs. So I'll give you a couple, just but not everything, just to save a bit of a surprise. But we have done it on pancreas, and we have done it on liver, we have done it on lungs, and of course we've done it on kidney, just to name a few. And there are more. And this this is the case of, well, if people want to add more organs to the list, we obviously need to do some fine tuning of this model. Now, because of how it's been designed, it's very clever how it's been designed. It does actually work already quite well on lesions, on even on organs that we've not trained it on. But of course, that's not good enough for the regulatory space. When you're clinically validating, you have to prove where your evidence is from. So what I would say is any specialty that feels like it's struggling or has a huge throughput of work. So liver lesions, for example, obviously lung, but liver lesions, there's a lot of liver lesions that come through. And people have to spend so much time measuring these things up and then also tracking them over time. Things like that. If people are coming forwards and saying, "Look, I need someone to really help me with that," that's an ideal space for us to go in. Um, Lymph nodes is another perfect example. There's not very many people focusing on lymph node based segmentation and tracking and progression and disease progression.
Correct.
So these tools are a nice middle ground before the automated models have become available on the market.
Yeah, that's thank you so much for that insight, Chris. So, I'll just sidetrack a little bit from what we've been discussing. So, we have a lot of young folks joining in for our webinar today, and being a managing director yourself, how do you know any suggestions for them to start out in this industry? If there's anything that you can recommend.
Well, it depends on your background. I mean, I've been had the pleasure of mentoring quite a few foundational level, early level medics. So if we're speaking specifically for clinicians here, um, I found some doctors who are even in those first sort of like 3, 4 years of training outside of medical school are thinking about alternative careers and but not necessarily losing touch with medicine. And I think the world is opening up a lot more to entrepreneurship. And
Yes.
I've had such a pleasure of being able to mentor these guys guys, and by guys I mean like, guys and girls, on in terms of their ambitions, but also they can still do locums or they can still stay in the clinic, and yet they can also maybe even start their own businesses. What I would say is the startup world is much more open to bringing on uh, younger professionals who are earlier on in their career. And you're not going to go in as probably as a chief medical officer, but you are going to go in as a valuable asset into any of these companies. And you should just, and if you don't become part of that network and ecosystem, the networking is so important. And going to the events where these companies are, you're not going to know that it's there, and they're not going to know who you are. Um, and I think that's really helped the people I've had the pleasure of mentoring to get into some of these jobs, which they are now working some of them for startups and spin-outs, because they've become part of the ecosystem and they've done that. If there are any scientists on the call, eventually I got sick of the lab, and if you're sick of the lab too, there's so many things that your skills are so transferable into so many different settings. If you are interested in medicine, you don't have to go into actual medicine. You can do like what I did. You can go into the health innovation side, which I personally find fascinating. And there's so many opportunities there for non-medics, but also but science specialists. I even know some PhD level scientists who went in as health tech investors and in investment companies. So keep your horizons open, think how your skills are transferable, and see what others have done before you, because it's such a different world now to what it was 15 years ago. And the entrepreneurial landscape in particular is so much more flexible, and it's online. Where you're able to work for people across nations. It's not like it was. So I hope that at least gives some insight. It's a very short period of time to give usually what I would speak about in over an hour. So
No, I'm sure you're going to get like a lot of messages on your LinkedIn to get for people to get mentored by you, Chris. No, but this is great, and I'm sure your last answer must have been very helpful for people who are starting out in this industry, especially the ones who are transitioning from a very lab specific or a research specific role to more of on the business side of things. Because I myself made that transition a couple of years back, and this has been great. So I think the last question from us, Chris, would be what's the next big thing for better medicine?
for us now, I mean, it's key for us to bring the products that we've developed so far to the world. And we're starting to do that. We are working with CARPL, of course, and
Yeah.
some others, but certainly CARPL to bring these products to the world and prove that we're not just talking about it, we're actually going to do it. Um, After that, I think our ambition really still lies in focusing on those organs that have been sort of neglected in this space. Because every cancer patient should have the same level of care. And if we are focusing on just one organ, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's lung, breast, and prostate are the big killers, and they are significant. And anyone developing in that space is doing the right thing. But if we just focus on them and we forget about the patients who have kidney cancer, who have adrenal cancers, that who have HCCs in the liver, they're going to have 20th century medicine, whilst the lung and breast and prostate patients have 21st century medicine, and we have to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's what's next for better medicine. That's the dream.
We definitely look forward to the holistic approach, Chris, that you're taking towards detecting cancer. And on that note, thank you so much, Chris, for joining in
Thank you.
today. This was fun, and I've learned a lot. So thank you so much. And to all our audiences, thank you so much for joining in, and we'll see you next week.
Great. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye.